Welcome everyone, and look forward to the session together. So, Lou, would you like to kindly lead us through the prayers? Thank you.
Taking refuge in generating bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened with the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create to listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create to listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create to listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Abandon evil doing, practice evil well. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Abandon evil doing, practice virtue well. Subdue your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. Like a star, an optical illusion, or a flame, a magical illusion, a dewdrop or a bubble, like a dream, a flash of lightning, or a cloud, so should one consider all compounded things. By this merit may we attain omniscience and overcome our enemy, our harmful deeds, and may beings buffeted by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death be liberated from the ocean of existence. The Heart of Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain in Rajagriha together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in a concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection and wisdom, beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then to the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity, the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that. And the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokitesvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter lineage who wishes to practice the activity of profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, and path. There is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment and reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata Om Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhi, Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then a Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattvacharyavatarya, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattvacharyavatarya, no surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Praise to Manjushri. Homage to my guru and protector. Manjushri holds to his heart a scriptural text, symbolic of his seeing of all things as they are, whose understanding shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways the loving compassion of a father for his only son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dhamma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and frees us from the iron chains of our karma, who wields the sword of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever its sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of all ignorance. You whose princely body is adorned with the 112 marks of a Buddha, but has completed the 10 stages achieving the highest perfections of a Bodhisattva, but has been pure from the beginning. I bow down to you, Manjushri. Om Rapatsanadi. With the brilliance of your wisdom, O compassionate one, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind. Enlighten my intelligence and wisdom, so that I may gain insight into the Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. By the virtue of offering to you assembly of Buddhas, visualized before me, this mandala built on a base resplendent with flowers, saffron water, and incense, adorned with Mount Meru and the 4 continents, as well as the sun and the moon, may all sentient beings share in its good effects. Please enjoy and bless me and all sentient beings to be released from the 3 poisonous minds, for I am offering without attachment my body, enemies, friends, and strangers, and all possessions for the objects of my greed, ignorance, and hatred. O holy and venerable Lama, from the clouds of compassionate form and the skies of your Dhammakama wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dhamma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatiyami. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious gurus.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So we'll just spend a couple of moments recollecting our purpose in being here together, examining these precious stanzas of Shantideva. So withdrawing our mind from our hustle bustle of activities, just centering on awareness of our body just as it is at this moment. Just letting our breath assume a natural flow or rhythm, just quietly alighting upon the breath, as might a feather upon a breeze. And now very gently become aware of our state of mind. If it's in turmoil or jumping around, just let it subside in its place. And now, from the very depths of our heart, we generate a powerful altruistic concern for others, becoming aware that exactly like us, they seek to be free from suffering and to obtain happiness. In this, there's not the slightest difference between one person and the next, between the richest person or the poorest. And because I am just one, and these others are countless, their need is immeasurably more vast than our own. Just think how wonderful it would be if we could turn our attitudes towards benefiting them in every conceivable way through all our activities of body, speech, and mind. So, in our own quiet way, firm this resolve in our heart. This is why we are sharing these precious teachings together. It's for this purpose. How wonderful. And with that, we can start the commentary. You'll notice pretty quickly that the content today is moving along quite rapidly, but also in the customarily cohesive way that we find in Shantideva. So last week, I'll just recap briefly, we're meditating on the impurity of the body. And we did this from a number of directions. And in particular, we did it according to the way in which the relevant verses fell beneath 5 subheadings. An example for why it is unsuitable to be attached to the body, meditating on the impurity of the body, contemplating the lack of essence of the body, the reason why it is unsuitable to be attached to the body, and because the body disintegrates quickly, it is suitable to practice virtue. So this emphasis on practicing virtue is the outcome of our awareness of the impurity of the body. So this is something that really requires some thought and analysis. It's a remarkable connection to be making. Anyhow, the reality that the body disintegrates very quickly and therefore it's suitable to practice virtue was brought home to me very powerfully this week when a very close friend very quietly mentioned to me that she had just had a recurrence of her cancer after being in remission for a number of years, and she's now got cancer in both lungs. So this is a real moment in lived time, and Geshe Doga's advice to her was very, very beautiful. It was not to worry, to relax the mind, to make prayers to Tara and recite her mantra. So this is, kind of very, very pith advice, something that one can take into their practice immediately in a very clear and definite way. So this idea, recommendation not to be anxious, is very, very important, because so much of our anxieties, we know, stems from often befuddled views of what's what in both ourselves and the world. And so being sick suddenly, significantly sick, forces us to prize away these layers and these conceits that prevent us from really getting on with the wonderful task of practicing Dharma. So the suitable time to practice virtue is now. There is no other time to practice virtue other than now. So there's a very beautiful evocation of what practicing might mean found in the sutra, chanting the Dharma together. So I'm going to read this passage, share it. A mind absorbed in meditation sees things just as they are. In a Bodhisattva who sees things as they are, great compassion unfolds for sentient beings. Such a person thinks, I should bring it about that all sentient beings see everything just as it is as a result of meditative absorption. Moved by that great compassion, this person quickly completes the training in higher moral discipline, higher thought, and higher wisdom, and awakens fully to the highest genuine full awakening. Therefore, I should be well established in moral discipline, not moving, never slacking off. In this way, one should reflect on the greatness of resting meditation for oneself and others, and in order to go beyond endless suffering in the lower realms and elsewhere, and for the sake of obtaining. So this invokes the need to rest. I'm sort of working from Geshe Doge's advice to relax. There's a form of relaxation here to do with resting in the state of being of things as they are. And so it invokes the topic of mindfulness of the body. So in the Satipatthana Sutta, which I mentioned last week, we have the following. When walking, she knows, I am walking. When standing, she knows, I am standing. When lying down, she knows, I am lying down. When sitting down, she knows, I am sitting down. However her body is positioned, she knows it to be just that way. When going or coming, she practices with awareness. When looking, retracting the limbs, extending the limbs, carrying the begging bowl, and wearing the monastic outer robes, the inner robes and shawl, when eating, drinking, chewing, getting rid of sleepiness and fatigue, coming and going, standing up and sitting down, falling asleep and waking up, speaking and remaining silent, and while doing solitary meditation, she practices with awareness. End of quote. So likewise, from time to time, as circumstances require or even demand it, we can also ground ourselves by practicing mindfulness of the body in this way. In his training anthology, Shantideva places this mindfulness of the body under the heading protecting the body. The significant point to take on board here is that such mindfulness of the body is a means of giving up fruitless activities, which involves mindfulness of respecting the evolution of actions and protecting our state of obedience to the instructions of the Tathagata. End of quote. So if we lack significant mindfulness of our body, how can we expect or even hope to utilize our limbs, for example, for the benefit of sentient beings? And this just for starters. So last week I gave the example of extending one's hand in an act of generosity. That is a use of the body to perform that skillful act. If we lack sufficient mindfulness of the body, how are we going to have the wherewithal to conceive of performing such actions? So this was the pith instruction contained in the verse with which we concluded last week, which said, I should conceive of my body as a boat, a mere support for coming and going, and in order to benefit all others, transform it into a wish-fulfilling body. Conceiving of our body in this very, very especially refined and marvelously utilitarian or practical manner cuts across all varieties of egotistical inflation. Because the fact is our body is implicated in the mechanisms of our egotistical inflation in very, very extensive and elaborate ways. And so the bare mindfulness of the body that was described before, I'm aware when I'm standing, I'm aware I'm sitting and so forth, is a way of beginning to seize on the mere real fact that we have a body and it can be utilized without any impediments or extraneous operations clouding that wonderfully simple fact. So, as mentioned last week, even our eyes, if they're considered in this mindful way, become pathways to intensely beneficial actions on behalf of others. As we find in the Noble Multitude of Jewels Sutra, which is quoted by Shantideva, and as for those sentient beings who come into his field of vision, men, women, boys and girls, even including animals, we should arouse thoughts of loving kindness and compassion towards them all, thinking, I should act so that all those sentient beings who come into my field of vision or give me alms will go to good rebirths. I will attain this kind of practice, end of quote. So, of course, we can adjust and therefore extend the same instruction to embrace the fields of the other senses, for example. And as for those sentient beings who come into her field of hearing, women, men, boys and girls, even including animals, she should arouse thoughts of loving kindness and compassion towards them all, thinking, I should act so that all these sentient beings who come into my field of hearing or give me alms or will go to good rebirths, I will attain this kind of practice. So though this instruction was originally worded to address the Venerable Sangha, particularly regarding how they should maintain the correct attitude during their alms round practice, we can easily swing it into our own secular domestic domain. For example, merely hearing a voice in the distance, we think, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from, of suffering and the causes of suffering. May that being who I am hearing abide in equanimity, free from attachment and hatred. May that being achieve the supreme bliss of liberation. Please, precious Buddha, bless me that this might be so. So, due to the infallible law of cause and effect, there will be an indelible link, a karmic bond established with that being you have just heard, that will definitely ripen in the future due to having engaged in this practice. So this is really something to take on board, because it completely introduces the radical turnaround idea that we can use this body as an instrument for the carrying out of virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind in this continuous mindful fashion. So, in short, we are to seize our current opportunity and particularly take advantage of our current human body to its very fullest potential, considered in terms of our bodhicitta motivation. Geshe Doga says, as the commentary highlights, by using our body like a boat to cross the ocean of cyclic existence, having crossed to the other shore, enlightenment, we need to transform our body into the precious wish-fulfilling body of a Buddha's body. By engaging in the practice and having generated the altruistic mind of bodhicitta, then the practice one engages in is the six perfections. So, through the combination of the altruistic mind of bodhicitta and the actions of the six perfections, we engage in the practices to reach enlightenment. Thus, this is the crunch Geshe Doga is giving, we need to use our body now as a means to achieve a complete transformed state where one achieves the two bodies of the Buddha, the wisdom truth body and the form body of the Buddha. This becomes the means to fulfill one's aspiration to benefit all sentient beings. End of quote. So this is how we can perceive a continuum, one established between our current body, which we're attempting or seeking to use or utilize skillfully, and our resultant enlightened bodies of a Buddha, referring to the Rupakaya and the Dharmakaya. So in this way, we arrive at our next main topic heading, to be skillful in practicing virtue. And Geshe Doga notes that the presentations under this heading are very practical and applicable advice for our everyday life, and are something that we definitely really need to take on board. So there are three subheadings: making ordinary actions beautiful, skillfully interacting with others in a virtuous way, and being skillful in the actions of the three doors. The first, making ordinary actions beautiful, is itself subdivided into three: how to eat, just how to act when meeting others, how to handle one's possessions, and to perform all actions in a courteous manner. So to take the first, how to act when meeting others, we have verse 71, which reads, now, while there is freedom to act, I should always present a smiling face and cease to frown and look angry. I should be a friend and a counsel of the world. The advice here seems very direct, doesn't it? Very straightforward. But it is helpful to observe an interpretive refinement. We are to notice the reference in the first line, now, while there is freedom to act. Geshe Jumper Tekchok indicates that this means that we are to act in this smiling, engaging way when we are indeed in possession of such freedom, because sometimes we are not. Or rather, if we consider countless past lifetimes, mostly we are not. Geshe Jumper Tekchok says, when we have control over our body and mind, and we meet others, we should ensure that we display a good facial expression when we have control. This is not talking about when we are without control or freedom, such as when we are full of fear. It is when we are in control. End of quote. So I think this is an important clarification. Otherwise, we would be somehow forced to smile, perhaps, in a charming manner, even when in situations of extreme duress, perhaps that of intense pain, breaking a limb after a fall from a ladder, etc. The emphasis here, in other words, is on being realistic as to what is achievable or even feasible at particular experiential junctures. But the unifying factor is the emphasis on benefiting others in terms of our everyday social encounters. This is a really remarkably simple, but in its own way, radical proposition. We practice most keenly, most effectively here at the very front of our engagement with the world of social interactions, not in some detached place or cave. For example, we could experiment with the following. For one day, we will undertake to present a smiling, welcoming face to every single person we meet or pass in the street. This is an exercise which you can actually explore doing. This doesn't mean that we have to sort of produce some manic expression of absurdly ecstatic happiness, because such would actually be a put-off, if not downright scary, especially to strangers who might understandably wonder about our actual intentions. Rather, by softening our facial expression and combining it with a feeling of genuine respect and affection for others in our hearts, we seek not to exclude others whom we encounter. Somehow freeze them out, but instead to offer a sincerely friendly face, and this in an utterly unfeigned and unexaggerated way. We need to locate, part of this experiment, those occasions when we do naturally produce such a face. Perhaps when we're seeing our small niece or nephew, or coming home to a dearly loved dog or cat. We don't need to be overly intellectual here. Such a delightfully gentle, joyful, and welcoming expression arises naturally in such situations. We're delighted to see that person. So the experimental task is to see if we can carry such an expression beyond the immediate confines of those familiar, even intimate domestic settings or situations. At the same time, we can quietly observe with a corner of our mind what is the nature of those occasions or moments when such an expression seems to flee or depart from us, depart our orbit, as it were. Perhaps we're walking towards someone at work, for example, whom, for whatever reason, we resent. Our face muscles begin to tighten up. Our gait suddenly becomes stilted and somewhat awkward. We fidget with our collar or our hair. These are precious moments to identify and consider as they indicate our own emotional disturbances. Our emotional afflictions are in play and are infecting the scene, even so much so that we find ourselves putting on a stone-like mask devoid of any palpable expression. Or even we put on a face of hostility, which may be conveyed by very subtle unconscious body language, such as a narrowing of the eyes, a pursing of the lips, or a refusal to achieve or maintain eye contact with that person. So Geshe Jumper Tek Chok indicates that we're to do our utmost to avoid wearing a face of hostility or simply a barrenness of concern. This is the interesting idea, isn't it? Having a face that is barren of concern, sort of nothing is being indicated by that face. It's not giving anything of reassurance or value to the person confronted by it. It's because our affection, our spontaneous concern for that person is either completely not there or it's drained away because of the play of one of our emotional afflictions. So that's on the side of our own face, but we're also being invited here to consider how we respond to the expressions of others. But in any case, Geshe Jumper Tek Chok says, when we meet with those going along with a really hard, tough look and with a really glum, serious expression, peoples whose conduct is bad, in our minds, we should feel a fondness for them and think, poor things, feeling like they were dear to us. This is the general way of going about things. So here we're taking the idea and applying it to the face of the other, if you like. And how do we respond to that look of hostility without becoming perturbed? This is really important to investigate. There remains creative scope, however, having said this, for ourselves strategically employing what we might call wrathful expressions in particular circumstances. So we're not saying that wrathful expressions are ruled out per se, but they can be skillfully used if they have a certain, if you like, polemical value. Geshe Jumper Tek Chok again gives the following example. Especially when our life is in danger and so forth, or when we're being bullied by others, and there is a purpose in showing a fierce expression, that is the expression we should use. End of quote. So we might think here of a situation where we're facing a violent physical attack. To adopt a fierce expression indicating a manifest readiness to protect ourselves from harm might just persuade the intending assailant to fall back and rethink their hostile plan. And bullying, of course, is a very pertinent other case. Bullies thrive on signs of subservience, as such as a part of their power-hungry master plan. To indicate that their aggression is simply not acceptable is surely in their interests and also in ours. Certainly, we're under no obligation from a Buddhist or any other perspective to succumb to their bullying. So you can see here, we're trying to look at how we can actually utilize facial expressions in the path to enlightenment. It's a wonderful reflection. So we think, of course, of teachers and parents. They certainly know the usefulness of expressions very well. So a parent will show a wrathful expression to a child to stop it in its tracks when it's about to undergo a destructive course of action, for example. Or perhaps a child has bitten another child on the arm because it regards that child as having taken its favourite toy. So a parental response to that might be a look of absolute wrath and horror to indicate to that child who's bitten the other child's arm that that just simply isn't an appropriate way of going about things. So Geshe Jumper Tech Chop continues. Similarly, when we are talking with others, try to say that which goes down well in the mind of the other, bearing in mind, of course, considerations of the pros and cons. So this consideration of the pros and cons that is mentioned here requires, obviously, a capacity to read, using sort of that in parenthesis, to read emphatically the mood or feelings of others. We must divine beneath the surface with as much precision as we can muster. So it takes a definite degree of calm mindfulness in order to be able to do this. If we are flooded with our own stream of powerful emotions, particularly conflicting ones, we'll be incapable of reading the other accurately or with any degree of acuteness or subtlety. Further, to avoid the mechanical or even feigned meeting contrived facial expressions, we need to be in contact with a genuine feeling of affectionate warmth, because that's the source of the affectionate face. So I just wanted to mention here a personal situation. I've heard feedback from those visiting Buddhist centers for the first time that they sometimes feel disconcerted when, upon their arrival, they are greeted by a stream of benign frozen smiles as they proceed towards the meditation room. Everyone sort of though the visitors are being ostensibly greeted with smiles and welcoming warmth, the abstracted eyes and tight lips they encounter as they proceed down the passageway belie that outward expression. These people, these Buddhists, are perhaps smiling because it is dutiful, the right thing to do. But it is not arising from a warm, relaxed space. It is somehow obligatory. They're being told by their centre director, greet everyone with a smile, so they feel welcome. So sure enough, they're greeting everyone with a smile. And some of those smiles are downright alarming. So I'm not pointing the finger at Buddhist centers here. This can be in any social terrain. I'm just speaking from my own experience. I'm proposing that we generate ways to express a natural and genuine concern for others with our facial expressions and our body motions. And of course, these cannot plausibly be established if disjunct from our actual inner emotional life. Carrying, for whatever reason, resentment on the inside, but a fake put on smile on the outside as a kind of lip service to compassion, a mimicking, if you like, of its outward face, is not going to pass what the Australians call the pub test. I don't know if you have an equivalent in America. They say, oh, that won't pass the pub test, meaning it doesn't accord with ordinary community values and social respect. It's simply off kilter, not acceptable behaviour. I'm sorry. So often politicians get accused of not being able to pass the pub test when they make certain pronouncements, for example. So there's a great wisdom in the folk lore of the pub test. So we're dealing with that kind of wisdom here. It's not a high wisdom, it's a very pragmatic one. Cho-san, you were? Hi. Is anyone wanting to comment as we go forward? No, we're all right. So the fact is, the capacity to hoodwink ourselves is quite large. Our Dharma practice is not a form of theatre composed around an inner fear that if we don't act appropriately, we'll be rejected by others, particularly our spiritual colleagues. Therefore, we must look the part. Rather, it is a sincere process of transforming our inner attitudes via a transformation of our emotions themselves. In this way, and one might say only in this way, will our outer demeanour naturally accord with our inner demeanour. So I'm reminded here of the account of Chenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, crying, and Tara leaping in manifested form from his falling tears. In this way, she is a manifestation of the rescuing dynamic aspect of compassion itself. I've also witnessed, along with many thousands of others, His Holiness the Dalai Lama crying as he was seated on his teaching throne in Bodh Gaya, crying as he considered the plight of others who were suffering. This was part of the build-up to conferring the Bodhisattva vows. His Holiness made no attempt to hide his tears, nor did he attempt to wipe them away. There was no sign of embarrassment, awkwardness, or shame. It was rather the most powerful expression of compassion manifesting in an utterly unhindered way, accompanied by His Holiness's own words of advice as to how to generate the bodhicitta attitude itself. So, in short, by being mindfulness of the nature of our facial expressions and considering how they might be impacting others in either positive or negative ways, we are positioned to then explore how we might utilize them in terms of steering them towards a kind of seamless unity with our inner attitude of fondness. So these are issues that we might never have sort of isolated to think about in this sort of very particular way before, but Shantideva is certainly inviting us to do so here, and it bears great import. Of course, it's just one illustration of how we might become mindful of the body and its impact on others. So in the next subheading, we have how to handle one's possessions. And verse 72 reads, I should desist from inconsiderate and noisily moving around chairs and so forth, as well as from violently opening doors. I should always delight in humility. The contained instructions here should be interpreted through the lens of the last line, requesting we handle our possessions and thus ourselves with humility. This invites reflection on the manner in which we might seek to manipulate or even exploit our immediate environment, including our possessions, to make a point indicative of some inner disturbance or even petulant rage. So instead of gently and politely answering a question that upsets us, we might slam our cup down, even so hard that it might smash on the tabletop. We might, someone said something we don't like, we might suddenly shove our chair back, scraping it across the floor so much that it tips over, indicating that we're ready to leave the room. So we might feel that our partner should be doing more of sharing the household chores. So we very demonstrably start picking up clothes and stuff in front of them and then shoving it with great gusto and overemphasized hand gestures into the washing machine or into the rubbish bin or whatever, while muttering and cursing to ourselves in a kind of psychobabble that they, the other person, are intended to hear. We all need to come up with personal examples here, as Shantideva is requiring us to address the nature of our ordinary, unexamined behaviour, how we operate through the medium of our three doors. This is why, as mentioned earlier, Geshe Doga indicated that the presentations under this heading are very practical and applicable for our everyday life and therefore need to be really taken on board. This advice I've already quoted, but it is valuable, isn't it, to remind ourselves here that we are indeed dealing with the nature of our everyday life, together with how we might swing it into line with our Dharma practice in an organic and vibrant way. Who has not been devastated by the sound of a slammed door during an altercation with a family member? Sometimes those slammed doors seem to resound across months and years, even across generations. In the case of family feuds or interfamily feuds, even across generations. So Geshe Jumper Tekchok observes, sometimes you can see cracks around the door frames. This shows the damage done by closing doors too forcefully. It also harms people meditating. I recall going into an Airbnb and the walls had gigantic punch mark holes in them. Someone had lost their temper and had pounded into the wall and then left the building in this sort of state of complete dishevelment. So the slamming here, sort of implied by Shantideva's verse, is able to range from simple inconsiderateness. We just don't bother to think that someone's quietly studying and doesn't want to slam door at that moment, or it might be a potent, highly targeted form of aggression designed to wound or injure someone in some way. So after the door slamming might even come actual physical blows to the body of the abused party. So a slammed door can be a harbinger of more serious aggression to come. So I'm just raising all these issues around something as simple as slamming a door. Shantideva's next heading, perform all actions in a courteous manner. And the verse 73 reads, the stork, the cat, and the thief, by moving silently and carefully, accomplish what they desire to do. A bodhisattva too should always behave in this way. Other translations include the last two lines of the last verse in Batchelor's translation here in this 73rd verse. I just mentioned that, but it's not of substantial significance in terms of how the meaning is read. The bodhisattva does not proceed by being overtly noisy and demonstrative, seeking to draw attention to themselves as somehow significant or important, or even the rightful or proper center of attention. Rather, she should proceed in a quiet, pleasant way, seeking to change the attitude of others via gentle, considerate actions of body, speech, and mind that are in accord with the scale and the nature of the actual situation. This doesn't mean we don't seek to meet kind with kind. If someone is aggressively yelling at us in a very harsh way, we don't need to approach them with a similarly harsh yelling voice. Because proceeding in such a histrionic way will only further infuriate or upset the person we are seeking to skillfully subdue. And it also means that our own actions will be unpredictable, even to ourselves, which is to say we might even lose control if we choose to go that route. I just want to mention here a personal story, which I did mention some time ago in relation to the thought transformation teachings. And it's a story of my friend Marianne, who was driving over the Westgate Bridge. Westgate Bridge in Melbourne is a big single-span bridge that links two parts of the city across a section of the port, the harbour, the port. And it's very high, and unfortunately, historically, it has been a chosen suicide spot. It's now been fenced off in such a way that people can't climb over the barriers. But anyway, this is before that happened. So my friend Marianne was trying to go from Melbourne to Williamstown, where she lived, across the Westgate Bridge, but was stopped by a cordon of police. And she looked ahead to work out what was happening and saw a man balancing on the edge of the bridge. He'd already climbed over, but he hadn't actually let go and fallen. So Marianne was told by the police that she was not to proceed. She was out of a car by this stage. She was very concerned for what was happening, and she was trying to advance. The police stopped her and said, "You're not to proceed." And Marianne, in her wisdom, and I use that in the very best sense of the word, roared out, "Move aside. I am a woman." The police were so taken back by this sudden manifestation of a hyper wrathful cosmic mother that Marianne was able to walk towards the man. And as she did so, her manner became incredibly subdued, incredibly quiet, incredibly careful, and she approached the man in intimate increments so that he didn't feel threatened, which he might have done if she had rushed towards him. He might have used that as the opportunity to let go, but that didn't happen because she proceeded so carefully. And when she reached him, she had an incredibly quiet and prolonged conversation, at the end of which the man threw his legs back over the barricade and went in Marianne's arms, weeping, back to where the cars were. There were ambulances there by this stage. He was rushed to hospital, and you could say that the suicide scene had been circumvented, but that's not my point in telling this story, although it's a wonderful dimension to the story. It's the way in which my friend manifested different guises in that scenario to accord with the actual necessary circumstance. This is remarkably wise behavior. And she went to see the man in hospital and continued to have a friendship with him from that point on. So it's just a remarkable story. But I wanted to add here that nurses are exemplary practitioners in this regard. The skill with which they subdue a distressed patient or a family member is so very worthy of our fullest admiration. That nurses in Melbourne, in Australia, should have to reluctantly threaten strike action in order to secure reasonable employment conditions in our big, admittedly overstressed metropolitan hospitals always strikes me as a bizarre misalignment of priorities. Surely these are some of the most difficult and demanding jobs in our community, but because they are so frequently female-dominated in terms of sort of employment patterns, they are systematically underpaid. So childcare and psychiatric workers, care workers are another case in point. So I just sort of raise this because some of my most moving moments have been witnessing nurses looking after people in hospitals who were fighting to get out of the hospital against their own best interest because they were suffering from a medical crisis of some kind. So this is really a perfect example of skillfully interacting with others in a virtuous way, which is our next main heading. And this has 5 subheadings: how to act in relation to well-meant advice, how to act in relation to speaking the truth, how to relate in relation to creating merit, how to act when the qualities of others are praised, and the benefits of making others happy. So how to act in relation to well-meant advice. 74 verse reads, with respect, I should gratefully accept unsought after words that are of benefit and that wisely advise and admonish me. At all times, I should be the pupil of everyone. Gultsabje says, although one usually should have to invite advice, if someone gives well-meant unsolicited advice, one should place that advice respectfully with joy on one's crown. Without pride, one should always become the student of all who have provided good advice. End of quote. So underlying this instruction is a hidden and perhaps all too familiar scenario whereby we spurn and resent the unrequested advice of others. So again, we have to look at our own experience here. We view it as an intrusion on our privacy or a swipe at our own capacity to look after or care for ourselves, or even as an unwanted display that someone else's advice is to prove somehow more valuable or more pertinent than the advice that we can offer ourselves. Somehow they're manifesting that their advice is better than our advice, and we resent that. So this is why we're being asked to wear the advice given sincerely by others on the crown of our heads. Rather than debunk or dismiss the advice, we are to honour it by placing it symbolically above our own estimation of ourselves, as indicated by the spot on our crown, usually reserved for the Buddhas or for our holy gurus, whom we view as inseparable from the noble ones. It's therefore, this gesture, a sign of tribute that we now place our advisors as crowning ornaments in this esteemed place. Further to this acceptance and honouring of advice, even or especially when unsolicited, we are to view ourselves, as Shantideva indicates, as the happy student of all. Not just some, but of all who have offered us good advice. In this creative, generous way, we also widen our awareness of just how we can receive teachings or advice from those who are technically or ostensibly not our actual chosen teachers. We can learn, for example, even profound truths from unexpected quarters, from unexpected people, from unexpected directions. We must be open to this. Because, yeah. I don't think this verse is arguing that we're obligated to take all prophet advice on board, especially without reflection. What if the advice is simply misadvised or outright wrong? Instead, I feel it means we're to respect and honour the intentions of those who offer it to us. This will be the case even if, for whatever reason, we remain circumspect as to the validity or the authenticity of the advice itself. Perhaps someone is recommending that we kill, for example. They might be saying you should relax, learn to relax by spending time going fishing. So this is why Geshe Jumpa Tekchok emphasizes we should only embrace such advice if it accords with Dharma. Very specific here, if it accords with Dharma. And to ascertain whether or not this is the case requires critical discernment from our part. But in any case, we are nonetheless to gratefully receive the advice. So we have the expression of gratefully receiving it, as otherwise we would be spurning, turning away their generosity in offering it. So even if misguided, we can still pay respect to the person. This is really an important distinction to make. This means that upon determining that it is indeed, if it is, good Dharma advice, we should listen to the advisor, the giver, carefully and respectfully. So I'm just going to mention here, I'm sure we've all had our equivalent of this, when one is diagnosed with cancer, one immediately becomes the vessel of innumerable offerings of advice from all quarters. And this might even extend, in some cases, to recommendations that we forgo our Western medical treatments altogether and maybe instead drink an infusion of a specially concocted herbs made into a brew in a special pot. There seems to be no end to miracle cures that will descend upon you. I'm not saying that there's not value in these other systems and other things, but I'm talking from the point of view of being the recipient of this sudden avalanche of advice, all conflicting, by the way, all at once. How do we handle it? So the emphasis is on how we might best respond, not to benefit ourselves in this situation, but how best to respond in order to benefit those others who are giving the advice. This is the radical reworking of the scenario. By expressing joy and delight at their kindness, even when they are suggesting strange, untested ideas, we please their minds and encourage them in the practice of generosity itself. It is the same, isn't it, when someone gives us an utterly useless birthday present. We don't show a miserable face and hand or shove the item rudely back. Rather, we graciously accept the gift with a smile and a warm hug. So my reading of this verse, therefore, is that whatever the case, whatever the nature of the content of the advice, we are to pay homage to those who offer it and thank them for their genuine concern. In this way, we cut across any tendency to resort to standoffish pride or even arrogance that will result in us looking down at them, even in a patronizing manner. Geshe Jumper Tech Chop does invite us, however, to also feel free to estimate the actual value of the advice offered in terms of the attitude of the one giving it. If, for example, they give in order to make a display of their own power and the depth of their own ostensibly magnificent practice of giving, how generous am I in giving this to you, how lucky you are to receive this splendid advice from my lips, then that is a fault from their side that might be better contained. He gives the following example. People giving advice should themselves normally have good conduct. One way in which they might have bad conduct, they try to give the impression that they have a great practice, that they have great realizations, and so on. You can be sure, he adds, in that case that this person is no such thing. A person who has a good attitude and conduct should never try to let you know that they are something special. They would not display such an aspect because they would be calm and subdued in mind. A person who tries to give others the impression that he has something none of you lot have and is familiar with this from before, sort of drawing on a richness of experience that you don't have and so on, proves, says Geshe Jumper Tech Chop, this person has no practice. Under such circumstances of bad attitude, we are justified in being somewhat wary of the quality of that advice. So we're still able to discern the value of the advice, is what I'm getting at here. But according to our bodhicitta vows, we can't use their arrogant or vain behavior, no matter how blatant or how extreme, as an excuse to abandon them altogether to their fate, being a whatever objectionable person that we've decided they might be. Such would be to forfeit our bodhisattva vows. And just imagine how often in how many past lives have we ourselves given bad advice to others, especially out of some motivation of personal aggrandizement or selfish gain. Perhaps such a fault is even closer to home. Perhaps we even gave someone some misconceived or badly intended advice as recently as yesterday. So such scenarios become poignant when we're asked for advice regarding someone's breakup with their partner. I'm sure we've all encountered this scenario. Should they go to their lawyers to contest the settlement? Should they lobby in court for the custody of the children on the basis that the mother or the father is an alcoholic, even though this is not the case, etc., etc. Such examples are endemic in our culture. Screw the bastard, we hear people advise. Get every dollar out of him you can, we hear. He deserves nothing, or she deserves nothing. So, as Kunzang Peldon suggests, when hearing such advice ourselves, we should at once, I'm just changing direction a little bit there with that explanation. So we have to be very careful here. We don't get drawn in to the mechanics of the logic of the badly intended thought process there. We have to maintain a kind of clear independence. Pema Chodron, in her concluding comment to this verse, advises, so always strive to learn from everyone, but know that ultimately you are the only one who knows when you are stuck. Her reference here to being stuck refers to those blind spots, those faults within ourselves that others, for whatever reason, might be ready or eager to point out by way of rectifying advice. And such advice most certainly can sting. This is not a problem of the advice, but of our own internal constitution, the very one that we have masked by building in a blind spot. Considered in this psychological way, our friend, perhaps they are even our guru, might indeed have just done us a great favour, even if it hurts. So you can see here again, multiple takes on the same issue of advice here, and also considering advice from the other from their viewpoint, as well as our own. It's necessary to have some sophistication in our approach to these situations. If we just sort of learn a couple of maxims or dogmatic rules, we're not going to manage to cover the ground without maybe even disaster or get things out of whack or wrong. So the next subheading, how to act in relation to speaking the truth, 75, first two lines. I should say, well said to all those who speak Dharma well. And the next heading, how to act in relation to creating merit, refers to the third and fourth lines. And if seeing someone doing good, I should praise him and be well pleased. So little explanation is required here. But we're to appreciate that thanking and acknowledging the worth of the Dharma others have given us is not just to please their minds, but also to help ripen our own. This happens because we're in thanking them or feeling some gratitude, we're admitting to ourselves the value of the teachings. And it is obvious that we have received them in a beneficial way. That has created the impulse to thank. Thus, our move to express our gratitude is also an acknowledgement of the value we have just obtained, together with our intention to respect and foster it by developing and extending our own understanding. So, obviously, the proud and the arrogant will not be free to do either of these. they will resent the giver of Dharma for whatever reason they can conjure, and they'll also wish not to implement the advice. They might bury it or spit it out even. This is a somewhat dangerous move, maybe more dangerous than it initially appears, because in so doing, they are jeopardizing, speaking now in karmic terms, the opportunities they will have to receive good Dharma teachings in the future. Of course, for the vain and the arrogant, such implications, such karmic complications will be far from their minds. So absorbed are they in their self-aggrandizement. So we extend the same logic regarding the benefits of saying well said to all those who speak the Dharma well, to praising others for performing virtuous deeds. By doing so, by praising them for performing virtuous deeds, we reinforce and please their minds in the practice of virtue. And by being open and generous in this way, we also further ripen our own capacity for virtue. As Pema Chodron observes, this stanza gives us truly excellent advice for child rearing, but it equally applies to adults. So we're now talking about regarding ourselves as a student. I think there's immense value in always regarding oneself as a student who is therefore always ready to learn. Likewise, by inspiring joy and happiness in others by directly praising them, as Gyaltsab Sabje says in regards to this verse, we also inspire ourselves to perform virtuous deeds in increasing, widening circles. For example, we might see someone doing a good deed in a way that we would not ourselves have anticipated doing. We might not even have imagined doing that. By praising her and feeling delight ourselves, we engender the wish to perform similarly. I'll give an example here that left a real impression on me. That a number of years ago, there was a young man in Melbourne who, as part of a school exercise, who's in secondary school, had to come up with a way of helping others, a sort of social work experiment, I think. And he developed this scheme whereby he would collect unwanted bicycles and receive them and fix them up and then send them in a shipping container to Malawi in Africa, because they had a severe water famine there, and people were spending all days walking through the searing sun on foot to carry a single vessel of water that had been gained or sort of painfully extracted from a dying spring. So by giving them push bikes to ride, they could accomplish that deed in a matter of hours, if not minutes, and therefore be able to dedicate the rest of their lives to supporting the welfare of their family and their community and so forth. This idea is so remarkably simple. It is so remarkably practical. It's so remarkably doable that it was taken on board as a policy strategy by one of the major international welfare organizations, and is now being practiced in many countries around the world. This all stemmed from the thought of a schoolboy. How wonderful is that? So to pay tribute to that with generosity is really a wonderful thing, to offer praise. Gyaltsab Sabje suggests that there will be situations where we want to secretly, rather than openly and directly praise others. For example, sometimes if we offer praise in too strong a form, what does this check my volume here? Stephen, does it mean my voice is too loud or?
Your voice is sounding fine. The levels are perfect, Ross.
Oh, good. I don't know what that's there for. So anyway, it can somehow feed the fires of their self-blowing self-importance. And so as a Bodhisattva trainee, it might not be skillful to praise them in an overt form, but secretly we praise them because we recognize the value of their deed. So the next heading, how to act when the qualities of others are praised, pertains to verse 76. I should discreetly talk about the good qualities of others and repeat those that others recount. If my own good qualities are spoken about, I should just know and be aware that I have them. This set of instructions extends from the last. They deal with how we're to enhance situations in which merit is being generated, whether this pertains to the actions of others or to ourselves. Regarding the opening lines, regarding talking discreetly of the qualities of others, Gyaltsabje proposes why such discretion may be necessary. He says, secretly praise the qualities of others because if one expresses them directly, then they'll think it is flattery. And regarding the second set of two lines, he says, when others praise the qualities of a third, then agree by saying it is like that. End of quote. So in short, one confirms both the praise pertaining to the third party by agreeing that they are worthy of praise, while also confirming the perceptions of the person who is offering the praise. In this way, the benefits of supporting others are distributed widely. Regarding praise being offered to ourselves, we immediately enter contentious territory as a self-cherishing attitude may be lurking close by, ready to pounce on any morsel that will nourish it. Being attached to being praised is a source of innumerable problems. So I had a little sort of segue here dealing with the behaviour of certain politicians. But politicians are often really praise hungry and they'll do anything to get praise. So we don't have to elaborate there. But it's a problem that's not at all unfamiliar. So Gyaltsabje, following Shantideva, says, if your qualities are praised, then without conceit, analyse whether the mind has these qualities or not. If you simply recognise that you have that quality, recognise it without becoming proud. This is really, really important advice. It requires a certain skill, a finely modulated impartiality, because we're being asked to simply recognise without being caught up in the various elaborations. So having become familiar with the meditation practice of bare mindfulness proves indispensable here. Through sitting practice, we have trained to simply sit as various feelings and thoughts unfold within our sphere of experience. This is within a mindfulness establishment meditation. We do not seek to oppose or to foster these feelings. We merely acknowledge them for what they are. Of their own accord, if we observe them, they will arise, have duration, and then subside, like ocean waves. We impartially observe their movement without losing focus on the great sphere of awareness itself, which may be likened to the ocean, from which varieties of waves naturally arise and subside at all times, never leaving the luminous clarity of the mind. sheer awareness itself. Just as waves and the body of the ocean, even in its darkest, deepest depths, are of one nature, so are the feelings and the thoughts of the same luminous nature as our awareness itself. So by training in observing small, what we might call mental fluctuations, we can similarly remain calm and aware even when major perturbations occur, say a powerful feeling of envy or sadness, etc., or even happiness or ecstatic feelings for that matter. The point in this meditation, no matter what appears, we simply recognize that we are having that appearance without becoming caught up in it, seeking to concretize it or arrest it, keep it somehow. Being mindful in this bare way grants us great scope when we do have strong mental disturbances, whether pleasant or unpleasant. Say someone is praising us. Rather than seize on what they are saying, grab onto it with a kind of avid interest, as it were, we simply acknowledge, Shantideva's advice, we simply acknowledge what is being said. It is like a calm and steady tree letting the wind flow through its branches and leaves. If we quietly determine or estimate that we do indeed have that quality that is the object of their praise, we simply acknowledge it without any impulse to hold on to it or to store it tenaciously away as a precious relic, as it were, to be retrieved later in idle moments. We simply watch it coming and going. This is the exact same instruction that we encountered in the initial sutta quote with which I opened the class, except that we've now seamlessly transferred our focus from mindfulness of the body to mindfulness of our emotional feelings. You remember the quote said, when walking, she knows I am walking. When standing, she knows I am standing. When lying down, she knows I'm lying down. When sitting down, she knows I'm sitting down. So now we have, in regards to a mindfulness of feeling, quote, when experiencing an unpleasant feeling associated with sense pleasures, he knows I'm experiencing an unpleasant feeling associated with sense pleasures. Or while experiencing an unpleasant feeling not associated with sense pleasures, he knows I'm experiencing an unpleasant feeling not associated with sense pleasures. Or in relation to a mindfulness of the mind, quote, here in this teaching, bhikkhus, when a mind with greed arises, a bhikkhu knows this is a mind with greed. Or when a mind without greed arises, he knows this is a mind without greed. When a mind with anger arises, he knows this is a mind with anger. And when a mind without anger arises, he knows this is a mind without anger, etc. So the essential point here is that the mind is not being perceived in terms of I or mine. Rather, it is just mind. Considered in this radically unadorned or unembellished way, our intense identification, or rather our intense over-identification with our mind as us, is overcome. It is shorn of egotistical structuration, in other words. It hasn't been folded back into the mechanical operations of the ego because we're not allowing it to have any anchorage through the force of our bare awareness. So, so this is how we're to respond in daily life if we're practicing meditation when we do encounter words of praise. We simply consider the praise, and if it's reverberating, resonating with some quality we actually have, we simply acknowledge it and move on. We can feel delight at that moment, but we don't seize on the delight and try to extend it. We simply acknowledge it's arisen and let it go. So the point is, we don't try to elaborate, oh my, how truly good I am to have that quality. They are praising my qualities, but unknowns to them, I have other fantastic qualities too. It's just that you actually don't know about them yet. Such ways of thinking, which are sort of the egotistical attitude, would spoil the simple, gracious, or even grateful experience of rejoicing in our own virtue or attainment. So I'm just going to jump forward a bit here. I wanted to talk a little bit about rejoicing, because this is where we do take delight in the good qualities of others, and we can also take delight in the good qualities of ourselves. Kabje Zopa Rinpoche is famous for his emphasizing of the practice of rejoicing as a powerful meditational technique for increasing merit. For example, Rinpoche frequently emphasizes how rejoicing in one's own merit strengthens the merit and makes them double up. Rinpoche asks us to, quote, begin by understanding and reflecting well how every single happiness and success we experience in life, in this life, can only arise in dependence upon a cause, and that cause must be a virtue or merit. End of quote. So if we can't make this fundamental initial recognition, then we'll have little reason to engage in virtuous thoughts and activities. We must understand the relationship between causes and effects, in other words. Therefore, Rinpoche instructs, quote, every single good thing we have ever experienced, are experiencing, or will experience, depends on its previous virtuous cause. Therefore, these causes, the merit we create, are the most important things for happiness and success. No matter how smart we may be or how well educated, without merit there is no happiness and no success. We cannot achieve realizations on the spiritual path or even happiness in this life. Therefore, merit is extremely precious. Without merit, life is so difficult. Nothing good can happen, not even moment-to-moment happiness. But as we collect more and more merit, life becomes easier and everything can change. When there is a lot of merit, everything can happen, even beyond our imagination. Therefore, every single merit we accumulate is so precious. Now rejoice by thinking, I have been collecting merit in the past from beginningless rebirths up until now. All this merit is so precious. And I will collect so much merit from now up to enlightenment. All this merit is so precious. Think over and over again how amazing, how fortunate, how precious it is to be able to generate all this merit. Each one is a cause for the happiness we are seeking. Generate the thought over and over again. Saying words is not enough. If it is just words, you are not rejoicing. You must make the heart happy by rejoicing and appreciating. This way, all the virtues increase. End of quote. So in the same way, we are to extend this practice of rejoicing to the merits of others, both ordinary sentient beings and the merits of Bodhisattvas and the merits of our precious teachers, as well as the Buddhas. Rinpoche instructs us, rejoice in their qualities and how they have sacrificed in order with great effort and generated realizations and benefits for others. Rejoice in their past, future, and present merits. Rejoice in the extensive benefits that they are able to offer to the Buddha's teachings and to sentient beings. Pray from the heart to be able to do the same. At the end, dedicate all virtue by thinking, may I be able to create as much merit as all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and all the sentient beings in order to bring every single living being to the state of full enlightenment. So we've now arrived at the fifth subheading, the benefit of making others happy, but I'm going to actually stop the presentation here and throw it open for comment or discussion, because we've some very practical advice has been shared, and I'll be interested to see how it relates to your own experience and understanding. So, Stephen.
Oh, thanks, Ross. So this is going back towards the beginning of your wonderful teaching tonight. And it has to do with sincerity and Dharma practice. And you gave the example of the insincere and somewhat disturbing smiles that sometimes people are met with when they enter, the Dharma center. And I've heard advice, and I highly respect the person that gave that advice. And what they said was, sometimes you have to fake it in order to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, on the one hand, as I feel anyways, that you so wisely suggested, is that we want to be as sincere and heartfelt as possible. I kind of think of that as sort of the causal path.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas embodying certain practices, gestures, physical postures, facial expressions, in that way of kind of faking it while in order to make it, that is sort of the resultant path. And I think they both have virtue, but I would like to hear what others maybe say, what their view is of those two approaches.
Yeah, it's very good.
For me,
Interesting reflection
yeah,
there.
the second one, where I think there are pitfalls to, faking it in order to make it, because I think you can get kind of caught up in that. But I don't know what other people think, or maybe Ross, you would like to say something.
No, I'd rather hear what others are thinking, actually, because it's provocative material in the same way, isn't it? Yeah. And also, we're dealing with the exigencies of how to train, how best to train. So these are very real issues.
Right.
Yeah. Lou.
I think that
Hi.
maybe faking it until you make it internally by yourself or in your practice or in the gumpa when no one's looking at you is one thing, but faking it, but myself, what I would consider whatever I'm doing, how it affects the other people around me.
Mm.
And if I can have the mindfulness to realize that I'm disturbing the people around me, then faking it until you make it isn't appropriate. But it might be appropriate if you're doing practice and you're trying to visualize yourself as Yamataka,
Mm-hmm.
and you walk around the room and you fake it until you make it. But then when someone walks up to you, if someone comes in the room, it might not be appropriate to be faking it so much that you alarm them.
Yeah, that was interesting. That's like, I hadn't thought of that, Lou, but that's like really incisive, is to, focus. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with Lou to an extent. We're not all these, amazing hostess host, that can instantly turn on the charm the moment we meet somebody. And I sometimes I think you do have to fake it. Sometimes we need to be a little bit polite, and turn on that smile, but keeping in mind that when you smile, oftentimes, have you ever seen somebody who smiles and it doesn't reach their eyes? It's like, maybe if you're faking it and it doesn't reach your eyes, maybe you need to, clear away some of the darkness or some of the negativity that's going on in your mind, to allow that smile to reach your eyes. I don't know. That's kind of my thought.
I've got a way through the dilemma in a way, because I did suggest it, the experiment, the thought experiment, the experiential thought experiment of smiling at every person we meet during the course of an entire day. That has a particular efficacy, because it's likely that most of those people will be people we don't know. And so we're not going to have this kind of investment there necessarily in reacting in some particular way. We're being invited to just simply see who's there. So if we can smile to this person, share a smile with this person, and then share a smile with the next person, when a difficult person comes along for whatever reason, we might just find that we can convey the smile that we just had and do it again, which in a sense is faking it, but it's imbued with the presence of our practice of smiling as a spiritual activity. And so it becomes easier, it becomes less discriminatory, it becomes more open and more naturally through practice. And we're always going to have our own hardest cases to challenge us. And so we don't just look at the hardest case and keep hitting it hard. We can go for gentler, less difficult cases, if you like, situations. And by developing our demeanor in that way, then have the capacity to be more powerfully able to apply feelings of benevolence in a situation where we might formerly have had resentment, for example. This is the very essence of our spiritual what we're seeking to do through our spiritual transformation. So smiling here is just an example, really, of something that we're trying to do on every front. So Shayla's point about smiling sort of not with the complete face is a really interesting point. There are other people who smile just with their eyes, don't they? And you can barely pick it unless you know them very well. And that twinkle can be very, very potent and very beautiful, but they're not doing it in a sort of overtly theatrical way. It's a discreet smile. And so these are sorts of variations and fluctuations that we can explore. But I just don't know, from my own sake, this idea of setting out in the day with the intention to smile leads to often remarkably unplanned for events. Can anyone guess what they might be? In a really nice way. You end up chatting with someone, and that chat unfolds organically in a wondrous way. I remember once I was on a tram in Melbourne, sort of a mechanical mini train thing that goes down the main streets. We have them in San Francisco. Trams are small enclosed environments, a bit of a hothouse in a way. And I was sitting next to an old lady, and I turned and smiled and said, "How is your day going?" And she began to talk. 5 minutes down the track of what was a very easygoing, enjoyable conversation, she started to tell me about her young womanhood, where she had gone to Egypt and had fallen in love with a camel driver and had learnt how to train camels in the desert. And this is all taking place within a 10-minute gap between tram stops. And there's no way we wouldn't have shared those delightful stories about early courage and bravery, which of course is what it was. How inspiring is that? If we hadn't broken the ice with a smile, a shared smile. So it's almost trite to mention it, but it is actually very, very profound. And we have opportunity shops here in Australia where you would have the same, like Salvation Army, where you have a wardrobe full of clothes you no longer wear, so you donate your clothes and they're resold. I was speaking to the shop assistant in the Salvation Army shop here, and she said that there are people who come into that shop every day in order to have a conversation that they would otherwise not be able to have. And I had this conversation with her about this particular gentleman who had bought some ridiculous thing. When I say ridiculous thing, it was a little trinket ornament. And apparently he buys a little trinket ornament every day and takes it back to his single room accommodation in a retirement home. So the room is chock-a-block full of these little things. But the woman who was serving him spoke with him at length and with great generosity and dignity about other things that had nothing to do with that little trinket that he was buying. So she seized on the opportunity to communicate with this man. And then after he'd left, she acknowledged that he was indeed very lonely, and it was part of her sort of practice working in the shop to make him feel welcome and to enjoy his visit every day. So this is, again, what really a smile is, isn't it? She's representing a smile. She's welcoming a communication, a bond with this man who would otherwise perhaps be a stranger. So this ties in with that other point that Shantideva was making, to view these people, these givers, as teachers. For me, that woman telling me that story about how she relates to this gentleman was a very profound teaching. And I was moved and nourished by that story, and would hopefully now seek to be able to just be a little bit kinder to strangers who I meet in the street. So I'm just sharing that. I'm sure we've all got examples, similar examples.
I had a little lady that used to call 911 in the middle of the night, and we would chat for hours.
So we've just got a few minutes left. If there's no more comments. We're now at the 5th subheading, skillfully interacting with others in a virtuous way. This pertains to verses 77 and 78. All deeds of others are a source of joy that would be rare even if it could be bought with money. Therefore, I should be happy in finding this joy in the good things that are done by others. So it's pertinent, isn't it? In this life, one will be peerless, and also on the other side, there will be great happiness. Faults cause unhappiness and suffering, and also on the other side will be great suffering. So I've just laid the foundation for this in the account of rejoicing as indicated by Kabje Zopa Rinpoche. Gyaltsabje renders the meaning as follows: all the actions of the 3 doors are to make others happy. Hence, this happiness of others is so precious that it is priceless, like a rare object that cannot be bought even with great wealth. So this is quite wonderful to think about. So I can extend the commentary a little further next week, but it is remarkable, isn't it, how down to earth Shantideva's advice is here. You know, it's really, I thought, what's a word for it? It's demeanor. What is an ethical demeanor? But a demeanor here isn't just a sort of an outer sign of ethical integrity. It's suggesting that if we are truly ethical, our demeanor will be appropriately expressive of virtue. That is what Shantideva is saying. And therefore the invitation, getting back to Shaila's earlier point about maybe there's a value in faking it, maybe we need to train ourselves a little bit in the outer forms of virtue in order to induce the transformation of the inner virtue. And so we mightn't feel like sharing our tray of chocolates, for example, which we've just received at a party, because it's our favorite flavor. But because we're Dharma practitioners, ostensibly, we force ourselves to hand the box around. And then we attempt to feel delight when there's not a single chocolate left to be returned to us. This is fantastic way of practicing. So we're slightly ahead of ourselves with the outer gesture, but it will induce a transformation of the inner. So we're working on both simultaneously. So I think it's really important. That's what I meant by organic and spontaneous. The two come closer and closer together in that way. So thank you very much. And I'll ask Lou to kindly lead our dedications. Thank you.
For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide, to dispel the misery of the world. May all the pains of living creatures reckon solely upon myself, and through the might of the Bodhisattva Sangha, may all beings experience happiness. May the teachings which are the sole medicine for suffering and the origin of every joy be materially supported and honored, and abide for a very long time. I prostrate to Manjughosha, through whose kindness wholesome minds ensue, and I prostrate to my spiritual masters, through whose kindness I develop. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha, and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jeweled bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow. May that which has arisen never diminish, but increase more and more. May my venerable Lama's life be firm, his white divine actions spread into 10 directions, dispelling the darkness of all beings in the 3 realms. Long life prayers for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. To the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. In the lands encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chen Rezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until psychic existence is ended. A prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation practice. Fearless teacher and assembly of children of victorious ones, Travakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, together with lineage, all the offers of refuge in infinite lands. Please now bestow the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. And holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you are the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of victorious one's teachings and mother living beings who suddenly departed to peace. At this I lost hope. Nevertheless, to the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of the mind generation of the children of victorious ones, with a smile of a new reincarnation, swiftly beaming in glory for fortunate disciples.
Thank you very much, everyone. I look forward to seeing you again.